The diner buzzed with the clatter of plates and the hum of late-evening conversation. Ryan Carter sat across from his son Noah when the young man's voice dropped low. "Dad, can she eat with us?" In the corner, a woman named Emily Hayes sat alone, a single bowl of soup in front of her, her eyes carrying a quiet kind of exhaustion she could not hide. Ryan did not answer. He stood up. What he did next silenced the entire room and made his own son look at him differently forever. The rain had thinned to a slow drizzle by the time Ryan Carter pulled into the gravel lot outside Mason's diner on a Tuesday evening. He killed the engine and waited a moment before opening the door in the manner of a man who needed those 2 seconds to switch from work to whatever came after it. Noah was already unbuckling beside him, 19 years old. Now, lean and quiet, home from his second year of college and still living in his old bedroom because rent in town was higher than reason allowed. They had been coming to Mason's once a week for almost 6 years, ever since the funeral, ever since the house had stopped feeling like a place either of them wanted to eat dinner. Inside the diner smelled of coffee and seared onions. The booth by the window was open as it usually was on weeknights, and Ryan slid into it with the practiced ease of a regular. He ordered the meatloaf without looking at the menu, and Noah asked for the same. Ryan ran a small commercial real estate firm 2 towns over nothing, flashy but steady, built on 12 years of careful contracts and the firm habit of never owing anyone a favor. He balanced his checkbook every Sunday and refused to leave a problem unfixed past midnight. The people in his office sometimes called him fair. They never called him warm. He had decided a long time ago that warmth and clarity rarely fit in the same room. Noah saw her first. She was sitting at the two-top near the back against the wall where the lighting was poorest, and her posture made it clear she had chosen the seat for that reason. Brown hair pulled into a knot that had loosened over the course of a long day. In front of her was a single bowl of soup and a glass of tap water. Nothing else. She held the spoon carefully, as a person holds a thing they want to make last. Noah turned back toward his father and lowered his voice. "Don't look right away. The woman behind you 2 tables back." Ryan waited half a minute, then reached for the salt shaker and let his eyes drift past her without lingering. He saw what Noah had seen, the thinness of the meal, the way she kept her purse tight against her hip like someone who had learned not to set it down. The exhaustion that was more than tired. He had seen his late wife wear that same look in the months they were figuring out how to pay for treatment without breaking. "She was already at that table when we pulled into the lot," Noah said. "I watched her through the window. She hasn't ordered anything else." Ryan picked up his water and took a slow sip, keeping his voice level. "She came in to get out of the rain, maybe." "She didn't come in for the rain, Dad. You know she didn't." Ryan did not answer that. He turned his fork over once and set it back. A part of him wanted to do what he always did in situations like this, which was nothing. Not because he didn't care, but because caring without thinking it through was how a man got pulled into other people's lives in ways he couldn't manage. He had built his whole adult life on the principle that you helped your own, and you left strangers their privacy. That was the line. That was how the world worked. The waitress passed the woman's table and asked if she wanted anything else. The woman shook her head and gave the kind of polite smile that meant the answer had been decided before the question was asked. Ryan watched her hand go briefly toward the side pocket of her purse, then come away empty, as though she had checked something she already knew the answer to. She went back to her soup more slowly now, because the bowl was nearly finished, and she had nowhere else to be. Noah set his glass down softly. "Dad, can she eat with us?" That was the moment Ryan had been waiting for and dreading at the same time. He knew his son. He knew that when Noah asked something quietly, it wasn't really a question, it was a measurement. Noah was watching to see what kind of man his father was when no one important was looking, and Ryan had spent enough years trying to be that man not to fail the test now on a Tuesday over a bowl of soup. Ryan kept his face still. "It's not that simple," he said. Noah's voice was soft but unmoved. "It's a meal. It's not complicated." Ryan answered without looking up. "You don't know her situation." Noah's reply came back just as quiet. "That's why I'm asking." Ryan let out a breath through his nose. The rational part of him, the part that had run his business through a recession without missing a payroll, began running through the angles as it always did. She might be embarrassed. She might be insulted. She might think he was hitting on her. She might decide he saw her as a charity case, which was, if he was honest, partly true. There were 8 ways this could go wrong, and only 1 or 2 ways it could go right. And that wasn't the kind of math he usually staked anything on. But Noah was still looking at him, and the woman in the corner had just finished her soup. She was tilting the bowl, now easing the last spoonfuls toward her, and in another minute or 2 she would set the spoon down and go. Whatever Ryan was going to do, he had less time to do it than he wanted, and the diner kept moving around him as though none of this mattered. He set his napkin on the table. "Wait here," Ryan said. He stood up. The diner went on with itself. Forks against plates, a low country song coming through the speaker, over the kitchen, pass a man 2 booths down, laughing at something on his phone. Nobody noticed him crossing the floor. He walked between the tables with his hands loose at his sides in the manner of someone walking into negotiations, except this was not a negotiation, and he was aware of that with every step. He stopped a polite distance from her table. She looked up, and up close, her eyes were a tired green, with something guarded in them that came up the second she saw a man approaching her table alone. "Ma'am," Ryan said, "I'm sorry to bother you." She did not answer right away. She waited. "My name is Ryan Carter," he went on. "I'm sitting with my son over there." He gestured, and across the room, Noah lifted one hand in the smallest of waves. "We were about to order. I noticed you were just finishing. We'd like to buy you dinner, a real one, and we'd like it if you'd come sit with us." She studied him for a long moment. The guard in her eyes did not drop. It tightened. "That's kind of you," the woman said. "But I'm fine." Ryan kept his voice steady. "I'm sure you are. I'm not asking because I think you aren't." Her reply came back quieter and harder than he expected. "Then why are you asking?" That stopped him short because he had been expecting either a yes or a polite no, and she had given him something harder. She wasn't going to take the easy version of his offer. She wanted to know what he wanted from her. "Because my son asked me to," Ryan said. And he was right to ask. She glanced past him toward the booth where Noah was sitting. Noah did not smile. He did not try to look harmless. He met her eyes calmly without performance, and whatever she saw in his face seemed to do something the rest of Ryan's words had not. She looked back at Ryan. "My name is Emily," she said. "Emily Hayes." "Emily?" Ryan gave a single nod. "It's just dinner. You can leave whenever you want." She looked down at her empty bowl, then at the door, then back at him. He could see her doing the same calculation he had done a minute ago, except hers had different numbers in it, different consequences, different things she could afford to lose. "I'll pay for my own," Emily said. Ryan shook his head. "That's not the offer." Her answer came back without hesitation. "It's the only offer I'll take." He almost said no. He almost insisted the way men like him insisted on most things. But Noah was watching, and something in the steadiness of Emily's voice told him this wasn't pride for the sake of pride. This was a line she had drawn on harder days than this one, and she wasn't going to step over it for a stranger in a clean coat. "All right," Ryan said. "You pay for your own. Come sit with us." She hesitated for one more second, then picked up the purse she had been guarding all evening and stood. Ryan led the way back to the booth, and behind him, he could hear her footsteps, careful even not trying to be small. When they reached the table, Noah slid over to make room. Emily sat down across from Ryan with her purse on her lap and her hands resting on top of it. She looked at the menu in the manner of a person looking at something they have not allowed themselves to consider in a while. Ryan watched her and felt for the first time in a long time that he had stepped past a line he had spent years drawing. He did not yet know what was on the other side. He only knew that his son had asked him a question and that the answer he had given was no longer one he could take back. Emily ordered a grilled cheese and tomato soup, the cheapest hot meal on the menu, and laid a creased $20 bill on the corner of the table before the waitress had even left. Ryan saw it and said nothing. Noah saw it too and gave the smallest nod, as if to tell his father not to argue. The conversation that first evening did not go far. Emily answered in short sentences, ate in measured bites, and kept her purse on her lap the entire meal. And when the waitress came with the check, Emily slid her bill across the table without ceremony and did not wait for change. She left before they did, with a quiet thank you that landed somewhere between gratitude and warning. Ryan watched her step out into the parking lot and turn left away from the row of cars on foot. Noah waited until she was out of sight and then said, "She walked here." Ryan did not answer. He set his napkin on top of his plate. He understood the thing his son had said without needing the rest of the sentence. For 3 weeks after that, Ryan thought about Emily Hayes, maybe more than he was willing to admit. And then he stopped thinking about her. And then he saw her again. It was at the hardware store on a Saturday morning. She was standing in the paint aisle with a list in her hand, weighing the prices of 2 cans of primer, the cheaper kind and the cheaper still kind. She looked up when he stopped at the end of the aisle, and the recognition in her face came with a small, instinctive tightening of her shoulders, as though she had been caught at something. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Ryan," he answered. He looked down at the cans in her hand, and then back up. "Painting." Emily set one of the cans back on the shelf. "Trying to. The bathroom in my unit has water damage, and the property manager said I could fix it myself or wait 6 months. Her voice was even, but Ryan could hear the math underneath it, the math of a person choosing to spend $40 she did not have, so she would not have to spend the next half year staring at a stained wall. He almost offered to send someone. He almost said he knew a guy who did small repairs and could swing by for nothing. He felt the offer rise in him as offers usually did, automatic and well-meant. And then he remembered the creased 20 on the table at the diner, and he closed his mouth around it. "It's a good brand," he said, instead gesturing at the cheaper can. "I've used it on rentals. Holds up." Emily looked at him for a beat, as though weighing whether the comment was a courtesy or a clue. She seemed to decide it was the first. "Thanks," she said. They stood there a second longer than was natural. Then Emily said, before she could think better of it, "My mother's been sick for a while now. I'm the only one looking after her." She did not elaborate, and Ryan understood that the sentence was not a request. It was a piece of her life she had set down on the floor between them, deliberate as a person putting a key on a counter, to prove she had nothing in her hand. He answered, "I'm sorry to hear that." It was the only thing he could think to say that wasn't more than she had asked for. They started running into each other after that at the grocery store on the corner, at the laundromat near her apartment, at the hardware store, again on a different errand. None of it was planned, but Ryan began to notice that he did not avoid those places either. He had lived in this town long enough to know the rhythm of it, and Emily's rhythm, and has started crossing in places where he had not paid attention before. He did not call it intention. He did not call it anything. Noah was the one who first said it out loud. They were driving home from Mason's one Friday night, 3 weeks into what had become a kind of cautious acquaintance, and Noah turned the radio down. "You know you keep finding her," he said. Ryan kept his eyes on the road. "It's a small town." Noah let that sit for a moment. "Sure," he said. "It's a small town." There was no edge in it, but there was no agreement either, and Ryan found himself pressing the brake a little harder than he needed to at the next stop sign. The 4th time they ran into each other, Emily was at the diner alone again, and Ryan and Noah were already in the booth. She came in to order food to go saw them, and would have left without saying anything if Noah had not stood up and waved her over. She came with the same cautious step and ate a bowl of soup at their table and paid for it herself. Noah did most of the talking that night, asking her about the book she had under her arm about the route she walked home, about whether she had seen the meteor shower the week before. He kept the air at the table light without making it shallow. By the end of the meal, Emily had laughed once briefly, and the waitress who had started to know all three of them brought her a refill on her water without being asked. Emily started letting them in by inches. She told them she worked 2 jobs mornings at a dental office, answering phones, evenings, cleaning a small medical building near the highway. She told them her mother lived in a small assisted living facility on the edge of town, and that the cost of it had been climbing every year, and she said it the same way she said everything else, without bitterness, as if reciting a fact about the weather. She did not tell them how close she had been to losing the apartment in February, but Ryan figured it out from a single sentence about how the rent had nearly gone up, and the way her hand stopped moving on her coffee cup when she said it. The first slip happened on a Wednesday. They were eating dinner at the diner when a man in a navy suit stopped by the booth on his way out. He clapped Ryan on the shoulder. "Ryan, the Henderson deal closed clean, whole block. Nice work." Ryan said something polite back, the kind of thing he said 100 times a year, and the man kept walking. When Ryan looked up, Emily had set her fork down. She was looking at him differently, not coldly, but the warmth that had been forming between them for the last weeks had thinned by a degree, and he could feel it. "Whole block," Emily repeated. Ryan kept his voice level. "Commercial real estate. It's what I do." She gave a slow nod. "I know what you do. You told me you ran a small firm." Her tone was not accusing. It was something worse. It was the tone of a person who had just realized they had been reading a sentence and missing a word in it. Ryan said, "I do run a small firm, 7 employees. The Henderson building was a one-time thing." Emily looked at him for a long second. "Right," she said, and went back to her soup. The conversation moved on, but the air at the table did not. She did not stop seeing them. But after that night, she started paying for her own meals faster, before the check came sometimes, before the food arrived. She started turning down the rides Ryan had begun offering on rainy nights. She started using the word "fine" more, and Ryan, who had spent his whole career reading the small movements of people across negotiating tables, knew what that meant and chose to ignore it, because he had decided somewhere along the way that he was going to help her. He had not told anyone, not even Noah, but he had decided. The first thing he did was the back rent. Emily had mentioned in passing that the property manager had agreed to forgive a late fee from January if she could keep current the rest of the year. Ryan called the management company on a Monday morning, paid the late fee anonymously through the firm, and asked them not to tell her where it had come from. The receptionist hesitated, and then agreed, because Ryan was the kind of voice on the phone people agreed with. He hung up and did not feel guilty. He felt useful, which was a feeling he trusted more than most. The second thing was the job. There was a friend of his, a woman named Margaret, who ran a small accounting practice in the next town over, and she had been talking for months about needing an extra office assistant. Ryan called Margaret, described Emily without using her name, and said he thought she would be a good fit. Margaret asked if there was anything she should know. Ryan said, "Pay her well. Treat her like you'd treat anyone else. Don't tell her I called." Margaret laughed and said she had not heard him sound like that in years, and Ryan did not ask what she meant. The third thing was smaller, and in some ways, the worst. Emily had mentioned almost in passing that the assisted living facility was about to raise its monthly rate again, and that her mother had begun to talk about moving home so that Emily would not have to keep paying it. She said it the way she said most hard things as a fact, without asking for anything. Ryan called the facility the next morning. He told the billing office he wanted to cover the difference between the old rate and the new one, anonymously for the next 12 months. The billing officer, who had been doing this work for a long time, said he had seen this kind of arrangement before, and he agreed to it without asking many questions. For a few weeks, things between them were easier than they had ever been. Emily got the job at Margaret's office. She came to dinner one Friday and told Ryan and Noah about it, with something close to lightness in her face, and Ryan ate his meatloaf and said he was glad. He told himself the lightness was the reason and not the lie. Noah watched both of them across the table and said very little. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, Emily told Ryan over the phone that the facility had called her, that they had decided not to raise her mother's rate after all that an old policy adjustment had come through. She said it with the smallest crack of relief in her voice. Ryan made a sound he intended to be surprise and said he was glad to hear it. He thought he had pulled it off. He thought he had pulled all of it off. He was a man who had spent 20 years closing deals quietly, and he'd begun to mistake quietness for kindness. The last thing he did, the thing that broke it, was the smallest and the most arrogant. The facility sent Emily a thank you letter the following month, addressed to her as the family contact. The letter mentioned in a line near the bottom that the facility was grateful for the continued generosity of its private donors and listed the dollar amount that had been contributed on her mother's behalf. Emily, reading it at her kitchen table on a Thursday evening, recognized the figure as something close to what Ryan had once mentioned in passing as the size of a small charitable gift his firm made each quarter. She might not have been sure, except that she had spent her whole adult life learning to read the shapes of help that came with conditions, and the shape of this one was familiar. She did not call him. She came to the diner on Friday, as she always did now, but she came earlier than usual, and she was already sitting in the booth when Ryan and Noah walked in. Ryan saw her face and knew before he sat down. Emily waited until they were both in the booth. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. The diner was busy, and that made it worse because everything she was about to say would be said over the sound of other people's ordinary lives. "I want to ask you something," Emily said, "and I want a straight answer." Ryan set his keys on the table. "All right." She placed the facility's letter on the table between them, the dollar amount visible. "Was this you?" Ryan looked at the letter. He thought for a half-second about saying no. The half-second was enough to tell her everything. "Yes," he said. Emily gave a slow nod, as if confirming something she had already known for longer than tonight. "The late fee on my rent in February? Was that you?" Ryan answered. "Yes." She kept going in the same even voice. "The job at Margaret's office." Ryan said, "I made a call. She made the decision. The work has been yours." Emily nodded again. "But I would not have been in the room without you." Ryan did not have an answer for that. He did not have an answer for any of it. Emily looked at Noah for a moment, and her face softened briefly before it closed again. Then she looked back at Ryan. "I told you the first night that I would pay for my own. Do you remember?" Ryan said, "I remember." Her voice did not rise. "I told you what the rule was, and you decided that the rule didn't apply to the parts of my life I wasn't watching." Ryan said, "I was trying to help." Emily's reply was quiet and complete. "I know. That is what makes it worse." She picked up her purse. The waitress was approaching the table menus in hand, and Emily lifted one finger polite, and the waitress veered away. Emily slid out of the booth and stood at the end of it. She did not look at Ryan when she spoke next. She looked at the window at the gravel lot beyond it. "You did not give me a meal," Emily said. "You wrote a story about me where I was the person who needed saving, and the worst part is, I did not even get to read it before everyone else did." Ryan started to say her name. She gave a single shake of the head before he got it out. "I was already doing it, Ryan. I was already doing all of it. And every time you stepped in, you took a little of that away from me, and you didn't even know you were doing it because it cost you nothing." She did not slam the door when she left. The diner kept moving. The country song on the speaker changed to a different country song. Noah looked at his father across the table, and for the first time in a long time, Ryan could not read his son's face. He looked down at his hands. They were resting on the table the way Emily's had been the first night, neatly as if holding something that was no longer there. The drive home was quiet for a long stretch. Ryan kept both hands on the wheel, and Noah looked out the passenger window at the dark shoulder of the road. They were almost to the turn for their street before Noah spoke. "Dad," he said. His voice was level. "Did you help her, or did you make her feel worse?" Ryan did not answer right away. The question was not shaped to be answered out loud. It was shaped to be carried home and kept. He thought about it that night after Noah had gone upstairs. He thought about it the next morning in the office when his assistant brought him coffee, and he caught himself studying her hands the way he had once studied Emily's, and realized he had been doing that for years, measuring the people around him, deciding which of them he was going to fix without asking. It was a habit he had not seen in himself until Emily named it. He thought about his late wife. He thought about how in the last year of her life he had taken over every decision in the house, the bills, the appointments, the slow shrinking inventory of things she could still choose for herself, and how she had let him because she had been tired. Once near the end she had said, "You're so good at this. I almost can't tell anymore which parts of my life are mine." He had thought at the time that she was paying him a compliment. For 3 weeks Ryan did not see Emily. He did not call her. He did not drive past the laundromat. He stopped at Mason's only with Noah, and they ate in the booth by the window without saying her name. The waitress asked once if their friend was coming, and Ryan said, "Not tonight." And the waitress did not ask again. He found in those 3 weeks that the silence at the table was harder to sit with than he had expected. What he did instead was something quieter than he had ever done. He called Margaret at the accounting office. He told her the truth, that he had asked her to hire Emily as a favor to him, and that he wanted her to know it in case the arrangement ever needed to be uncoupled. Margaret listened, and then she said, "Ryan, she's the best assistant I've had in 5 years. Whatever you started, she finished. The job is hers." Ryan thanked her and hung up and sat for a long time at his desk. He called the assisted living facility. He asked them to stop the contribution at the end of the current month and to send no further letters mentioning a private donor. He called the property manager and asked them if Emily was ever late again to call him only if Emily herself gave them his number. The property manager, a tired woman who had heard a lot of things in her career, said she had not expected a man to call back to take a favor away. And Ryan said he had not expected to either. He did not tell Emily he had done any of it. He understood finally that the point was not to confess and be forgiven. The point was to stop standing where he had been standing. It was 4 weeks before he saw her again. She was at the grocery store in the produce aisle reading the label on a bag of rice, the way she had once read the price tags on 2 cans of primer. She looked up, and the guard came back into her face, but slower this time, like a thing she had to put on rather than something she wore. Ryan stopped at the end of the aisle and did not come closer. "Emily," he said, "I don't want anything. I just wanted to say, I heard you. The night at the diner, I heard you." She did not answer right away. She set the bag back on the shelf. "All right," she said. He nodded and turned to go. Her voice came after him quiet. "Ryan." He turned back. Emily was looking at the rice in her hand, not at him. "If I ever ask," she said, "I'll ask. Until then, please just be a person I see sometimes." He answered, "All right." It was the only answer that was hers to keep, and he gave it back to her cleanly. 2 months later, she asked. Her car broke down on a Sunday, the 14-year-old sedan she had been holding together with patience and a slow mechanic, and she called him from the side of the road, and the first thing she said was, "I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you for a ride home. That's all." Ryan said, "I'll be there in 15 minutes." He drove out, and he gave her the ride, and he did not call the mechanic. When she got out of the truck at her apartment, she said, "Thank you." And he said, "Anytime you ask." And he meant the second word more than the first. After that, things came back slowly. She started joining them at Mason's again, not every week, but enough. She paid for her own meals every time, and Ryan stopped trying to talk her out of it, because he had finally understood that the creased 20 she had laid on the table that first night had not been pride. It had been the price of sitting at the table as herself, and he had no business trying to refund it. It was almost a year later, on another Tuesday evening, that the three of them were back in the same booth by the window. The rain was thinning the way it had on the night this had all started. The diner was busy. A woman came in alone and took the two-top by the back wall, the seat where the lighting was poorest, and ordered a single bowl of soup. Her purse stayed tight against her hip, the way Ryan now knew to look for. Noah saw her first. He looked at his father across the table, and he did not lower his voice this time. "Dad," Noah said, "can she eat with us?" Ryan looked at the woman. He looked at Emily sitting across from him with her own meal in front of her, and saw that Emily had already noticed. She was watching the woman, as only someone who had once been that woman could. Ryan did not stand up the way he had the first time. He did not cross the room with the walk of a man closing a deal. He set down his fork, and he said to the table evenly, "Let's ask her. All three of us." Emily met his eyes, and something in her face that had been guarded for a long time loosened just enough. They stood up together. They did not bring an offer. They brought a chair. When the woman by the back wall looked up, careful and tired, in a manner Ryan now recognized, he did not say, "Let me." He said, "There's room at our table if you'd like it. You order what you want. You pay for what you order. That's the whole deal." The woman looked at the three of them, at Emily most of all, and after a long moment she nodded, and she came.